In this episode, air, fuel, spark, fire. Let's go. In our last episode, we finished up the bulk of our big wiring job, plumbed our coolant hoses and lines, added some chassis braces, installed suspension and brake upgrades, and then cut, welded, and cut some more to build the front section of our exhaust. The finish line is in sight now, so let's get to work. Today we're starting where we left off, by fabricating the rear section of Thunderbolt's exhaust system. To build this setup, I'll be using the many bends that I have left over from Summit Racing's Rod Builder kit and a variety of high-quality accessories that offer great fit and excellent durability. I mentioned last time that I had a very specific sound in mind when drawing up the plans for this exhaust. To sum it up, I want it to be rowdy, but not too rowdy. Throaty, but not raspy. Deep, but with no drone. To do this job right the first time, I went to summitracing.com and chose a pair of high-flowing stainless steel mufflers from Magnaflow. These performance mufflers are designed to give you more power and provide excellent sound. They feature a large diameter perforated stainless steel core and a straight-through design for unrestricted flow. They come in all shapes and sizes, but I chose the 2.5-inch inlet and outlet 4x9 oval body version that measures 20 inches in overall length. Okay, let's weld them on. My plan was to start with the passenger side, where I already had an exhaust outlet hole in the bumper to reference for placement. Then I could duplicate that design on the driver's side. This involved cutting various sections of pipe and mocking up the bends with the muffler temporarily supported by my transmission jack. Space looks pretty tight here around the differential, but not too bad. After making good progress on that side and ensuring that this muffler setup would work, it was time to remove the stock rear valance in order to make provisions for the driver's side exhaust outlet. This involved lots of measuring, a Dremel with a plastic cutting disc, and a really steady hand, as you can't exactly ask for a do-over if you mess this up. With the valance cuts made, I made a matching cut in the bumper cover. The Dremel made pretty clean cuts, but a little filing was necessary to clean it up. Now it's time to choose a set of exhaust tips. As you can imagine, I spent, a month or so thinking about the design and placement. After all that deliberation, I chose a pair of Summit Racing stainless steel exhaust tips. These highly polished tips are a great value and come in many sizes and configurations. I chose this weld-on version that has a 2.5-inch inlet, 3-inch outlet, and a slanted and rolled edge. I used one of these on my Galant VR4 build last year and it still looks great. Now that I chose a tip, I can start to mock it up and get an idea of how I can place it back here. So after trying out a few ideas, I ended up with this design, which uses these universal exhaust isolators bolted to a factory hole in the rear frame. Once I get the final placement sorted, I'll weld them to the frame for good. Now it's time to tack weld the hanger to the muffler. After that, I removed the muffler and welded up the hanger off the car. So here's a look at the passenger side in place. I then repeated this same process on the driver's side. I tell you, after all of that, I need a break. Next, I pulled everything off the car to be welded together for good. I started by welding the Summit Racing V-band clamps in place. They'll make removing the rear muffler section a breeze, and they give me the option of running more than one rear exhaust setup. I can have a mild, wife-friendly design for date night, or I can easily switch to a louder, wild setup for solo runs to the grocery store for peanut butter and chicken nuggets. So after tons of welding, cutting, mocking up, and even more welding, here's the completed front-to-rear exhaust section. I'm happy with how this turned out, so let's bolt it on and finish this exhaust. One change that I made a little later on was adding V-bands to where the front pipes connect to the headers. The slip fits were okay and provided loads of clearance, but I just found them to be a hassle to work with. V-bands up here make it much easier to install and remove this piece as needed. Once I had the exhaust section in place, I added this modified differential brace back into the mix. I needed a little break from exhaust work, so I spent some time reinstalling most of the interior. I decided not to bore you with shots of me finagling all the stock interior bits in place, so I'll just jump to the best part: bolting the seats back in. These have been in storage for about 8 months, and this plastic wrap kept them dust-free and looking great. Okay, back to the exhaust. I wanted the car's weight on the suspension in order to help line up the rear mufflers and tips, so I bolted on the stock wheels and tires, perched the car on some wood blocks, and let the suspension settle for a bit. Then I torqued down all of the necessary suspension parts to factory specs. After that, I reinstalled the rear valance that now sports 2 exhaust cutouts instead of 1. So using the magic of video, here's both mufflers installed and hanging on their own. Now it's time to weld up the exhaust tips. I must admit, I'm really picky about well-placed exhaust tips. Thanks to this, I spent an embarrassing amount of time cutting, fitting, eyeballing, and repeating the process until I got the exact placement I wanted. Again, I started with the driver's side and then worked on the passenger side. After tacking them in place and finish welding them on my table, here's a look at the finished product. Alright, let's bolt them on.
Oops.
Yes, now that is the look I'm going for. Next, I thought it would be good to give the fuel filter a little extra protection, so I whipped up this simple heat shield, lined it with adhesive protectant, and bolted it in place. So here's a look at the complete front-to-back exhaust system. This part of the project took a big chunk of time, but it turned out exactly how I hoped it would. Now let's finish up some more tasks so we can hear it. I've done enough lurking on the LS1 Tech forums over the years to know the importance of a catch can when running an LS engine. So to handle the important job of keeping the intake path free of oil, I picked up this Moroso Universal Air Oil Separator from Summit Racing. As with the Moroso oil pan that we used earlier in the series, I was really impressed by this piece. It features a polished billet aluminum body and all the fittings and brackets needed to install it. Moroso offers vehicle-specific versions of these too, so check Summit's website for your application. After lots of head scratching, I found a great spot for it and modified this bracket that was part of the old 4-cylinder engine. So here's all of the parts needed for our installation. The air oil separator, the hose and drain fittings, some thread tape, a length of hose, and our mounting bracket. Alright, let's install it. With the unit mounted, we can run the lines to it. On the LS3, they're right near the throttle body. You can use worm gear hose clamps, but I had some of these laying around and like the easy installation and factory look. Next, to keep the hoses from flopping around, I cleaned up these old Mitsubishi clamps that I found in an old bin and put them to good use. Oh yeah, that looks right at home right there. With the wood blocks out from under the tires and the suspension settings zeroed out until I can get to a proper alignment shop, it was time to sit the car down on all 4 wheels for the first time in almost 9 months. Here's a look at how everything measures up under the hood, as everything is in place and mounted for good. Shortly after this, I filled up the oil and primed the engine to pre-lube everything, following Chevrolet Performance's instructions. Now it's time to fill up the cooling system. I'd read about many LS engine swappers struggling to properly purge all the air out of their cooling systems. This is often because the radiator fill can't always be in the highest spot, which is likely to trap in air and cause all sorts of trouble. I wanted no part of this, so I brought out the big guns. First up, aiming the front end to the sky. Second, the U-View Airlift Cooling System Leak Checker and Airlock Purge Toolkit. This OEM-approved tool is widely used by dealership service departments and allows you to perform a leak test, eliminate airlocks, and refill the entire system including the heater core in less than 2 minutes. It's incredibly easy to use. You just connect the gauge and fitting to the coolant fill neck, attach shop air, and it sucks all the air out of the cooling system, allowing you to check for leaks. If your system holds vacuum, that means there's no leaks and you can route the suction hose into a big jug of coolant. Turn the valve and bam, the cooling system is completely full with no airlocks. I was a little skeptical at first, but man, this thing worked great. One more job I wanted to complete before turning the key for the first time was making a set of air conditioning lines. This can be a major hassle on any custom engine setup, so to get a big jump on the process, I picked up Flying Miata's V8 AC line kit. As you can see, there's definitely some assembly required here, as you'll need some fittings brazed onto the lines. After getting turned down all over town, I found an awesome old school hot rodder at a machine shop who helped me out with this. Once I had those fittings brazed together, I could make the rest of the line assemblies using crimp connections. I'd never done this before, but this AC line crimper tool made the job pretty easy. Here's a look at my finished high side line. And now the low side line. Yeah, I think that turned out pretty... Wait. 1 gold fitting. No. Alright, that's better. With the AC lines finished and bolted on, it's time to pour in some gas, take care of a bunch of other tasks like bleeding the clutch and brakes, connect the battery, and fire it up. Alright! As much as I wanted to celebrate this moment, I was busy looking for leaks and listening for strange noises or any other potential problems. Thankfully, everything went smooth, and there was only the typical smoke that comes from residue burning off of new parts. After checking everything closely, it was time to make old Thunderbolt look like a car again, and bolt on the front end, starting with the fenders. The hood is on for the moment, but just for test fitting purposes. More on that in a bit. At this point, reinstalling dirty splash guards would be kinda silly, so I gave those a good cleaning too. Now the bumper cover goes back on. Hey, where did that hood go? You've seen me tackle a variety of jobs necessary to fit our Z06 intake. Well, this is the final piece of the puzzle, installing arrow catch hood latches and making room for the intake snorkel under the hood. Let's get to it. The first step is to protect the hood with plenty of tape and some blankets and towels to rest on. I've already made my reference marks when I had the hood bolted on earlier, so the first step is to drill a locating hole there. Next, using the locating holes we just drilled and the included templates, I measured the placement and laid everything out for good. I must admit that I desperately needed my wife's help for this crucial step, as she has a great eye for this kind of thing. After determining the final placement, I traced around the template and started making the necessary holes and cuts here into the front portion under the hood. After those nerve-wracking moments, I filed any rough edges and then drilled the arrow catch mounting holes. Hey, that's not too bad. Now it's time to mask everything off and give the underside of the hood a few coats of titanium metallic paint. Once that dried, the arrow catch latches can be installed for good and the hood bolted back on. If you haven't seen these before, they're an excellent design, giving you the benefits of hood pins without a giant pin sticking up through your hood. They can also be locked, and you'll never forget to latch them because you'll see them sticking up like this from behind the wheel. One more finishing touch addition to our engine bay are these hood struts that I picked up from Flying Miata. They're included in the Z06 intake kit, but they can be purchased separately and are a great upgrade to any Miata. Installation is easy. You just unbolt a couple fender bolts, replace one of your hood hinge bolts with the included bracket, and then attach the hood struts on both sides. The end result is a very clean factory look and no more clunky hood prop to deal with. They also raised the hood a little higher, giving you more room to monkey around under there. Okay, now we're ready for the road. Folks, here we are on our first real drive. Thunderbolt hits the streets. I've been putting around my neighborhood, just to get a feel for things and make sure there's no major problems or things I should be aware of, and that went well. So this is the first time I'm out on the road, getting some speed up here. When you're trying a car out like this after having it completely tore apart like we did, you're just listening for any strange noises, any strange smells, vibrations, rattles, squeaks, anything like that. So as much as I would like to enjoy this time and celebrate, I'm really sort of tense and nervous. Alright, well, this has all gone well. I'm gonna head back to the garage and put it up on the lift, check everything over, do our first oil change, and then from there I plan to take it to an alignment shop, get that all sorted out, get the wheels and tires that I'm gonna run on, and then we can do the rest of the break-in miles, and I'll get back to you and let you know how that all goes. Back here in the garage, I can collect my thoughts, and I have to say that I'm thrilled that the first drive went so well. I set my expectations low in case I had any problems, but the only issue was finding that the brakes will need to be bled again. So now I can take a close look at everything, check every nut and bolt, and then drain the oil and inspect the oil and filter to make sure that the new engine is good and healthy. Once that all checked out, I added a fresh jug of oil and headed out for a much needed alignment at my favorite shop, European Auto Garage in Knoxville, Tennessee. In addition to their top quality service, EAG also hosts a quarterly Cars and Coffee event which attracts an incredible mix of new and classic cars. Once the alignment was finished, I took a nice long drive as there are still plenty of break-in miles ahead of me. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Summit Racing for helping to make this video series possible. Thank you also to V8 Roadsters and the folks at Flying Miata for the great products and fast technical help. In the next episode, I'll put some finishing touches in place and show you how Thunderbolt turned out. For lots of pictures and details on this build, check out my website at v8mazda.com. So with that said, thanks again folks, we'll see you next time.